Welcome. Welcome to our session on Dev 101, one platform for your functions, applications, and containers. Maybe the first question, how many of you attended the Dev 108 session yesterday, introducing native and overview? Good, good. If you haven't, that session did a really good overview of general drivers for the project, what some of the reasons for Google to open source native, as well as introduce a lot of the partners and open source frameworks that are collaborating with us on that. It might be worth giving a watch. All right, so let's start with maybe oh, by the way, there's a video of that session available already today, so Dev 108. Let's do quickly, maybe start with a little intros.
Hi, I'm Ville Aikas. I've been at Google for about 11 years. I've been working in the cloud for about 9 or so. I was one of the first engineers on the Kubernetes project, did cloud storage, and a few other open source projects as of late, like Helm. I've been involved, Service Catalog, and most recently, Knative.
Right. And my name is Chmarny. I'm one of the technical program managers responsible for serverless at Google. All right, so apparently, I'm hearing Kubernetes is pretty popular nowadays, and a great understatement, I suppose. Its growing popularity has really driven kind of to become de facto target for many of the workloads, and why not? People are benefiting from the abstraction of the underlying infrastructure. It simplifies a lot of the pains related to that. The broad support from pretty much every single one of cloud service provider nowadays also assures a lot of portability for your workloads. And the rich ecosystem of point solutions filling the gaps around Kubernetes means that you can take your solution and really kind of adapt it and deploy it. So overall, I know there's still room for improvement. I think we can still make it a little better. But overall, the operator experience, the person who manages Kubernetes, is pretty smooth. But how about the developer? How about the developer experience, people who build on top of Kubernetes? Well, we think that that experience is not as great. I think there's still a lot of room to improvement because developers, on the end of the day, really just want to write code. Unfortunately, today, if you look at the kind of the experience of developer on Kubernetes, a lot of the work, in addition to writing code, also kind of mimics the experience of the operator. There's a fair amount of plumbing to do, fair amount of networking, fair amount of implementation, and so forth. So I'm going to introduce again, because apparently every session has to introduce native. So we've introduced native again. For those of you who have not attended the previous session, just a quick highlight, Kubernetes-based building blocks for serverless workloads. So one of the key kind of drivers or key properties of native is that it sets some key primitives for building applications on top of native. It provides initially build, eventing, and serving. And those are very first efforts to kind of simplify that experience, and we're going to go after other areas pretty soon too. It solves many of the modern development patterns. What I mean by modern here is that if you are bringing a database, a single node database, probably not the greatest place to run this on top of native today. But if you're looking for a microservice, to build microservices, stateless microservice, or 12-factor applications, native really solves a lot of good problems or issues related to deploying on top of Kubernetes, those type of workloads. It implements also, native also implements a lot of good learnings from Google, including 10+ years on App Engine, Kubernetes, and Istio itself from the open source community, as well as a number of contributions and kind of feedback and inputs from our partners. So these are the companies like Red Hat, IBM, Pivotal, and SAP that have worked with us before we even opened the repo over the last 6 months or so. We really could not have been where we are today without them. In addition to that, we also have started collaborating very early with a number of open source frameworks out there, function as a service frameworks that they're kind of building on top of Kubernetes. And the signal that was coming out of that was really good is that many of them already either taking native as an ingredient into their stack or replatforming the entire framework on top of native to simplify a lot of the boring tasks that are related to running your framework on top of Kubernetes. All right, so Very quickly, if you look at our documentation, if you look about any of the materials we publish, we often talk about the different personas. We talk about the developer, we talk about the operator. I think I want to take a very quick 30 seconds here to just capture some of the differentiation. The people who contribute to natives, who write code and improve the native stack itself, are the contributors here. They help the project and improve it. Then people who take that code and instantiate, create an instance of that and run it, we call them operators. They can do that on any certified Kubernetes instance that are offered as a service. Everything we're going to show you today is going to be on top of GKE, but the limitation should not be there for any of the demos to reproduce it. And then on the end, the people who are consuming that service that is being instantiated by the operator and using only the APIs are the developers. And really today, everything we're going to do is we're going to focus over here. I think there, frankly, could be another session about the operator and the community at large, too. All right, so Ville, why don't you give us a quick overview of the objects and give us maybe a demo later, too.
All right. So again, thanks for coming. So that was a lot of great information on sort of why we did some of these things and what we are focusing on today. And that really is the developer, as in, why do you care, right? So what we are going to be doing is, maybe switching a slide. It's the green one. OK, so when we started building this thing, one of the things that we wanted to make sure it's easy for you to come in this platform and to be able to feel very comfortable and feel very at home with this. So when you go ahead and come into a new system, you shouldn't have to have a very huge cognitive overload of understanding all kinds of different things that you might not care about right now. So when you come to Knative, the first day experience should be extremely simple. You should be able to come in, and you should be able to say, hey, I got some code over here. I would like to run it. So we want to make sure that experience is really easy. We also wanted to make sure that the API surface is familiar to you if you have used Kubernetes, right? So if you come into Kubernetes and all of a sudden you have to do something that is not native, no pun intended, then it's very tricky for you to go ahead and say, well, wait a minute, I want to do this, but when I use your system, I have to do that. So let's go ahead and take a quick look and see, can we switch the demo machine and just see what does it feel like when you come into this on your or day one.
Very quickly, I just realized I've been mispronouncing Knative the whole time. So I think there is an over-under going on Twitter right now. So very quickly, just a layout, because we're going to be doing a lot of demos, you're going to see a lot of console. It's going to be 3 panels throughout the entire session today. We're going to, on the very top, we're going to see the current workloads, which we don't have any right now, but we're going to spin up some in a minute. On the bottom left, we're going to just quickly see we're going to use Kale, which is an open source project to view and stream logs from Kubernetes. We're going to see the logs that are in a different namespace. And over here, we're going to be running a bunch of commands. All right. So everything we're going to show you again is on top of GKE, on top of native that's been instantiated using the documentation that's in the repository. So if you wanted to reproduce any of what we show you today, you could do that right away. All right. So let's apply that image, that manifest. And again, Ville was talking about Knative being idiomatic or intuitive. If you've worked on Kubernetes before, Native wants to use your experience with Kubernetes itself and leverage that to kind of enable you to be a better developer on top of Kubernetes. So we quickly see Native spun up let's take a look at maybe that manifest itself. We've used a very simple, as simple as physically possible manifest in here, deploying a pre-built container. You've seen that yesterday, maybe in a demo, you've seen this many times. What Native done here for you, however, is plumbed up all the other things, connected logging, deploy your routing, and everything like that. So let's maybe navigate quickly to here. Let's try to invoke it. Hello, GCP. You got to have this. Awesome.
2018, mate.
Ooh, 2019. Good. Almost as we wanted to show this way. So let's come back here and switch that to 18, just to show you how quickly and easy it is to deploy it. Again, I didn't have to do any new work. Just apply the exact same file. Wait for Native to do its magic. We're going to talk about exactly what's going on behind the scene in a minute. Wait for the 3 of 3. Switch over here. OK, let's open new tab. Simple. I wonder if my Chrome is caching some things here. There it is.
Yay, back into reality.
All right.
Can we switch back the slides, please? All right, so that's great. It's great to come into a system where you're going to have a really nice, easy way to get started, right? Many of these, so far, we haven't shown you really anything all that special, right? There's many tools that you can already do this with today. You can go ahead and have template solutions. You can download things that wire things for you already. So that part is not really all that exciting. But one of the things that we also wanted to make sure that we work very hard on designing the system is to make sure that we define very clear set of principled objects, so you can reason about the object model that we have built. So every object that you see in the system, you should be able to go and look at it and saying, like, I know exactly what that does. If I need to do X, I know what I need to look at. So in Kubernetes today, I like to think of it as the assembly language level for the cloud-native programming. So there's a lot of very good building blocks there, and if you put them all together just the right way, it's going to be awesome. But what we are trying to do here is build you maybe something like a libc, standard lib, something like that, higher level primitives that not everybody has to build those. Like in the battle days, everybody was building their own libraries. Okay? So we started off with a very simple object, right? It took two things. It says, here's my code, run it, and here's some config with it. And you can come in and very easily go ahead and iterate on that, push some new code. Everything works fantastically. Almost fantastically. So underneath, what we did is we took that service object and we created a configuration out of that. Okay? So configuration is another great practice that is taking your software, the code, and the configuration, and putting them together so that it's a self-contained unit, right? So this is a pretty standard practice from 12-factor and putting together all your stuff in one place and making sure that it doesn't get out of sync. Okay? Whenever you make modifications to the configuration object, or when you create one, underneath, Knative will go in and create a revision out of that. Okay? So you interact with the configuration object, and underneath, Knative will go in and make a revision object for you. And whenever you make a modification to a configuration, Knative will stamp out a new version of revision. So at the end of the day, for every modification that you have made, you will have a new version of it. So you have a linear history of all the changes that have been applied to your code. So that's pretty nice, right? What do I do with that? Well, you probably want to go ahead and put some traffic into that, and that's where we have our route object, right? So we are now go ahead and being able to come in and saying, OK, great. I have some software over there that I built, and I can easily go and make modifications to it. With the route object, you can come in and be very specific about how traffic flows into those objects. Okay? So again, let's just pause there just for a second. So the roles and responsibilities are very clear here. So if you look at the top of the box, service, that is very DevOps-ish, right? You're basically pushing your code in. Whenever you make a change, it goes out and starts serving traffic. And as you grow, you can start seeing we are going down the stack a little bit where you can say, maybe I have a clear operator role where the operator is responsible for shuffling my traffic, and the developer can go ahead and worry about pushing code. So let's go and see what that looks like. So again, great on day one. It was good to be in that land of just push some code, see it go live, exciting, great times. Then you start taking some customers, and you might want to change your practice a little bit. So let's see how native grows with you. OK, so here's what we're going to do now here. We're just going to go through a couple of slides together here, just so we can set the stage on what it is that we are going to do, and then Mark is going to demo it after that. But let's go ahead and say, so this is roughly what we had after we deployed the very first version of the software, right? So we have a route that is shuffling 100% of the traffic to the configuration that only has one revision, right? That's all great. So we are only specifying that 100% of traffic goes there. Now, let's push some new code, okay? But we don't want to shift any traffic to it, because we probably want to validate that that new version is. So hopefully you have some unit tests. Don't look at me, Scott. But then you might have some integration tests as well. And then you might want to go ahead and test your entire stack against the new version without affecting any of the possible production traffic that you have going on. Okay? So what we do here is we go into Knative and we say, hey, route, what I would like to do is I actually would like to create two targets. I'm going to go and create one that is targeting my old one, and I'm going to go and create a new one for my second one, the blue-green one, but I'm not going to give it any traffic yet. Oh, and also, please give it a name so I can talk about it. right? Because that name is not really friendly, so give it a fancy name. So push the new software, no changes to your traffic. So then typically you would maybe start rolling out your traffic a little bit. You might say, okay, well, typically maybe 2% experiment or 50% or whatever else it is, but Mark likes to live on the edge, so he's just going to go straight to 50. I told him he's silly, but whatever. So now we are basically going to go and say, great, let's go and do 50-50 traffic split just so we can see how things work, because in a demo it would be more wonky to run at 2%. And then in the end, once we validate everything, that's when we can go and shift all of our production traffic to the new version, happy, making money, and then we can turn off the old version, but we'll still leave it around. In case we need to do a quick little rollback, we can do that, so let's call that version 1. So let's see what that looks like on the demo machine, please.
All right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to kind of go through the same process. Oops, sorry. Blue-green, there we go. Same process. First of all, we're going to deploy our basic application. We've showed you how to do this before, so I'm not going to talk too much about that. Just to create the initial state, what would happen when you deploy your stack. So this is blue-green, and we're going to talk about stage 1. So let's deploy that. Wait for Knative to create the instance of that, all the necessary resources. We see some activity going on here, and magic happens. There we go. So, all right. So we have our instance stood up. It runs. The day one, the joy of deploying software is there. Everything is great. But then you say, well, I would like my thing to be, something better or fix some bug. So let's go over here and take a look at the stage 2. Very much the same deployment, another revision, just like we've done before, another configuration. But in addition to this, we're also going to create that initial route stub that Ville was talking about. So 100% to this old version, 0% to the new version. Of course, deploying application that doesn't have way to access to would not be fun. So we give it a name route so we can give it get to it. So let's deploy the stage 2 in here. Again, we're going to wait for this to magically happen. All right, I can start switching over here. And now what I can do is I can continue refreshing this. You will see the traffic continues going to the original version. But the beauty of this is that now we have this V2 in here that I can also peek at, even though 100% of the traffic is not going, none of the traffic is not going over there. All right, so now we've done with revisions. We've basically deployed 2 versions of the application. From now onwards, all we're going to do is we're just going to deal with that route object in here. By the way, is this big enough everybody can see over there? So in here, we're going to do this very aggressive switching for the purposes of demo. We're just going to go 50-50 because I don't want to hit Command R too many times. So let's apply this. Oops. Stage 3. Actually, let's wait for a second here. It's all routes, so there's nothing magical here. So going back to the original traffic, 50-50 is happening now. It's not science, so it's round robin of some sorts. And then now that we are successful, that stage of where we fixed everything and we want to deploy, we shifting or setting the traffic to the original version to 0. We migrating everything to the new version. Oh, and by the way, just to kind of have a historical reference to get to the previous version, we're going to name a new route that will allow us to go to V1. Again, no magic in here. Let's finish this. Switch over here. Let's just wait for this for a second. All right. There's still a straggler in there. No. I'm pretty sure my Chrome is caching something. There we go. 100% of the traffic, and we still can, as you have seen with V1, with V2 before, we can still reach to the old version if we wanted to explicitly. All right, can you switch back to slides?
All right. So couple of things that are interesting about that demo that I really wanted to point out, which is as we started with the original one, that was really easy to come in and get started, and it was more like, again, with the DevOps model, where you just push code, everything goes through. By introducing configuration and route objects, now what you can do is you can go ahead and start defining not only roles within your organization, but also with these objects by introducing things like RBAC rules. So you can say, OK, devs, you can push code all day you want, but none of it is going to make it into production because I will be in control of the route object, which seems nice, right? So, OK, so that was great. So we talked about how to get the code out there in the cloud. Everything is hunky-dory happy. But Knative, what have you done for me lately, right? So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about some of the other aspects of serverless that are typically things that you want to have out of the system, right? So the first one that we're going to talk is the, when you leave work, you're halfway to work, home, and then you realize, oh my goodness, did I leave the stove on, right? So this is the equivalent of, did I just spin up a whole massive test stack that is going to be running there the whole weekend, burning cash, money flying out, right? So Knative, can you take care of that for me, right? So one part of the serverless is you don't think about serverless. So why would you care about it if you left the stove on? Knative should be able to say, you know what? It's not in use. Let me go and put it away. Okay? That's great. The other way that it handles is, there's this very bursty traffic, right? Traffic pattern is not always like this, right? So your software makes it up into the Reddit or Hacker News or whatever the greatest new thing is that you find this software at, right? So you're going to get some new users, and you're going to get bursty traffic and everything else. You don't want to have to worry about how many servers do I have running, and did I bring up enough pods, and did I do this and that and everything else. Knative should just handle that for you as well, right? And also, it's easy to go and take away resources when they are not in use. It's not so easy to go and bring them up when they actually are needed. So going from 1 to 0 is actually pretty straightforward. You just delete things. But it's more tricky to go and bring them back up when they are actually needed, to go and service requests when the traffic actually comes back up. So let's go ahead and see how Knative handles this for us kind of behind the scenes. Can we switch to the demo machine, please?
The demo, please.
Yep.
Thank you. Yes. All right, so to do this, we're going to use the very first application we deployed during the first demo. As you can see, however, that the demo is not here, because thankfully, I was afraid that some of you are going to go to the browser and start hitting it. Nobody went there, and therefore there was no traffic to it. So let's see what happens if I start accessing this again. Native behind the scene. Start while holding that traffic and kind of waiting for the necessary pod to be spun up, brought it in, and there is our demonstration. So this was the cold start experience. The famous cold start that everybody talks about in still very complex situation, but Native does the first attempt at kind of solving that problem. Now, I'm not going to go here with a browser and start hitting it a million times. We're going to go and use a synthetic load to cheater, yeah. Synthetic load to spin up about 20 different threads with 10,000 requests for each one of those. And switch over here. Now, Native is going to go and start provisioning the necessary pods and everything. Watching command line and watching Kubernetes provision pods is as exciting as watching paint dry, I guess. So let's switch over to instance of our Grafana here that comes with Native pre-configured. It comes with number of different dashboards that the Native team, Knative team, has provisioned nicely for us here. I'm going to use two ones. First of all, we're going to take a look at the traffic. Let's maybe go a little to future here. You will see 3 lines. I'm colorblind, so I'm going to tell you what they told me what the colors look like. But we will see the green line, which is the actual number of pods. We will see the desired number of pods, what Knative thinks you should have in order to solve that traffic, and the number of requested. And you will see that let's switch over here very quickly. Show you the number of pods that Knative spun here for you. There we go. There's some activity going on, I would say. And refreshing, we see that this kind of what you want, what you get, and go on. In addition to that, you can also use a requester dashboard in here. Hopefully, you choose the right application. And refresh this. Why are we not seeing any traffic in here? Well, there's the first demo crash, I think. We should see the number of requests coming in for that request. I'm using simple all. It might be something with my time in here. All right, hopefully the other one was better. There we go.
Wait, break it.
Already broke a demo. Now, the other thing that's going to go on, as soon as the demo finishes, which is done, you will see the native start decommissioning the no longer necessary pods. So we'll go in and start. There we go. I was hoping for that to happen, just like Ryan yesterday. I got just as lucky as he did yesterday. Terminating the pods as the request starts coming in. Can we change back to slides? Sorry. We warned you. We're going to be a lot of switching there.
So that was pretty nice, and there was a couple of things that I don't know if somebody caught, but so you could see how the blue-green deployments were going away as well. So those things are all configurable for you, so you can decide what is the sleep off, what is the how long things hang around before they are considered obsolete. Well, not obsolete, but before we can put them to bed for a bit. So that's great. So now we have sort of kind of shown you how you can go and get your software on the cloud and manage it and things like that. And we've sort of kind of shown you how Knative comes in and takes away some of the things that you really don't care about in the serverless land. Also, what Knative does for you is handling going from source to code, right? So if you caught all the examples we showed you so far, we're just taking a pointer to a container, right? So again, as a developer, I typically don't care about that. I just want to write the software, and I want to say run the software, not the container, right? There's a difference there. Just run my code. So, so we also have a building repo that allows you to come in and say, OK, my code is over there in the Git or cloud storage or something like that. And you can come in and say, please take that code, just run it. I don't care about the build. Do it. So why do you as a developer care, right? Well, again, once you go and get up your laptop, you get all the tools installed and everything else, and the project grows a little bit, then you get your friend working on it too, and they have a different laptop, right? And then you start getting all those fun cross-compiling problems and the cross-image, and nothing works anymore, right? So now you can go and have an easy way to go ahead and say, you know what, let's do the build one way, just once. That seems better, right? There's also no need for Docker locally, right? So that's nice. Less things I need to do on my machine, less things I need to upgrade, less things I need to keep running. Great, perfect, right? Also, there's performance improvements out of this one. Because when I'm running in the cloud, I can take advantage of the cloud caching. So typically, the machines in the cloud have much bigger pipes, right? So they can suck bytes in and out faster, right? I can also take advantage of caching behavior of things like image layers, right? So if you're building something, chances are somebody else is building at least lower, middle-level parts of it, and your code goes on the top there, right? And then the nice thing is that because it all happens in the cloud, now you can go and start creating things like audit logs. You can go and add additional things into this tool chain that allows you to go ahead and say, who did what, when, and why, right? And again, this is something that is loosely coupled. So one of the things we don't want to do is we don't want to come in and saying, in order to use Knative, you must do things this way every single time, right? So in the first examples we showed you, bring your own tool chain, right? So many of you might already have a CI/CD pipeline running. Great, everybody's happy. But this allows you to also go and say, you know what, I don't really necessarily need that. Let's just go ahead and use this one. Or if you're coming in from the other land where you are running in the GitHub and building on the local machine, it allows you to move into the land where you're coming in and saying, like, you know what, just handle it for me. And then maybe out of that, you graduate again to some CI/CD pipeline or whatever else. And that's all fine and dandy. But again, these are the kinds of things that Knative does for you automagically, giving you that serverless thing, serverless kind of, I don't want to call it promise, but let's call it promise. It's just like, you know, going from source to running code. That's great. There it is. And also the, hey, I don't worry about the infrastructure, right? So far we haven't done anything here dealing with machines or lower level details, except when we actually go look and make sure that something is actually happening, right? It'd be a boring demo if we didn't do that. So we just kind of show those to you. But you don't have to worry about that. So let's look at the next slide.
Oops, sorry.
OK.
Demo.
Yes. So let's switch the demo and see what this looks like.
OK, thank you. So what we're going to do here, we're going to take the traditional Git operation. So we're going to take GitHub repository or Git repository hosted on GitHub. We're going to, in this case, we're going to follow a very simple application that probably is as simple as one could create a web server with in Go, but I'm sure there's some room to improve it. And it has a Docker file in here that specifies how I would like to build this. Obviously, this would apply for different languages in different kind of formats there. So what we're going to do here is let's fire this job so we can talk about it. Source. All right. So while this is, while Knative is spinning up the resources, let's take a look at the manifest that was used in this particular case. Again, we're building from GitHub repo. Knative supports both public repositories as well as secrets for private repos, so you don't have to be dependent on exposing the entire thing to the world. And we're going to have a couple components in here. First of all is the configuration component of the build process, which will include the source bit, which will indicate the source of the source, as in the repository from which we want to pull, as well as the branch we want to pull from. So it supports multiple branches. In addition to this, we're going to specify a particular template. Knative supports a number of different templates. We're going to use, in this case, a Canonical, which is an open source project, also already public, to create an image that will be pushed when done to a image repository. Knative also provides certain kind of shortcuts, so we're going to define a variable in here called image that will hold this URL. So in the rest of the configuration, we can just use that variable. The beauty of this is that when we come in here, when we start talking about the actual target of the deployment, we're going to specify we want to deploy this as an application. We want to use the URL of the image once was published to the image repository. And we're also going to define the other environment variables that we've talked about before, the same way you would have done for any other of the application. So let's take a look at where we are. Look like image is still being built. What Knative does is has a multi-phase process involved in here. So it first of all pulls all the necessary resources. It does certain months of configuration in it. Then once the image is built, publishes the image, then turns around and uses the image just like it did if you were deploying an application from a published image. In this case, we're seeing a 2 of 3, almost there. There we go. So let's take a look at this. What is it? Source to image. And there we go.
All right. Let me switch back to the slides, please. OK. So the nice thing about one additional thing I wanted to point out here is that another reason why you might want to care about this is totally pluggable, so that you can go ahead and have different kinds of pipelines here. So for example, some people have built things like .NET pipelines, so you can go and build things like that there. There's build-back support and so forth. So that's also very nice and customizable. So it's not only just Docker thingies that we built. All right. So great. So far, again, we've talked a little bit about some aspects of serverless. But sometimes it seems like what has come to be the norm.
There you go.
There we go. Am I there? Yeah, OK, great. I am here. Yes. OK. So it seems that over the last few years, it seems like what has come to be the norm for serverless is serverless equals functions, right? That's all it is, right? Well, with Knative, there's bigger thing that we are worrying about, which is serverless is much bigger than functions, right? So we've been doing serverless for a long time with App Engine, so we are kind of like trying to bring the two things together. However, the one nice thing about serverless, the programming model that typically resonates with most developers is the eventing-driven one, right? So I have written some software, and when I hit it with the browser, that is still event-driven, right? I'm coming in and saying, could you do something for me, right? But what we have done with the Knative is really given a first-class principled objects for describing where those events are coming from, right? So on the bottom right there, we have the event consumers, right? So those are the things that we have been deploying all day long so far, right? So there's nothing different about those things. We are just pushing code, rolling it forward, doing our testing, and everything else. So those are the event consumers. Okay. On the top right, we have the event sources, right? So something is producing events for me, right? So this might be, for example, a GitHub. So GitHub has a very rich eventing source. Kubernetes cluster itself is very, very rich. Anything that happens in the cluster, chances are it's pushing out events. For each one of the event sources, there's typically more than one event type, so the kind of event it supports. So for example, the GitHub, you have a pull request. So if somebody comes in and says, hey, here's a pull request, or if I make a commit, those two events are very different in their context, right? And so there's one-to-many relationship in Knative for event sources and event types, right? And so what is left then is, OK, I have those event types and sources, and I have my code here. How do I wire them together? And for that, there is an object called a flow. So with the flow, you go ahead and say, Mr. Knative, go over there, take those events from there, and wire them over to here, right? So let's go and see what this looks like in practice if we were to go ahead and to see how seamless it is to go ahead and go from the application-driven programming or just the pure container model to the function in programming using the same tool sets. Can we switch the demo machine, please?
Almost done. A couple more switches. All right, so to illustrate this, what we're going to do is we're actually going to wire the Knative into an event stream that's coming from IoT devices. Google has a product called IoT Core that provides an easy way, like a gateway for registering devices and securely managing them with keys. So what we've done here is we've created one of those gateways. No code required. It's simply a GUI operation that define two different types of protocols we're going to be receiving on, MQTT and HTTP. Define our Mqtt IoT device, because I couldn't get one of those from our team over there. And it's called Next18. And Next18. And we're also going to, by default, what IoT Core does, it creates a sync for all those events. So in this case, we're going to have two topics on PubSub. PubSub is the message broker in Google Cloud. One is for IoT data, so that data itself. The other one is metadata about the devices that connect. So you can event on things like my device has connected or disconnected or a certain threshold. So this is our source of events. What are we going to do here? We're going to go in and switch quickly and take a look at the actual code itself. Now, event flow, there we go. Let's take a look at first the code that we use to publish it. All we've done here, yeah, we have some Go things like defining the types, but bottom line is we've done one function that handles the events that are going to be passed to me. The cool thing about it is that in this entire code, there's no references to PubSub or any proprietary Google code. You wrote idiomatic Go language that receives events. This works for Node. This works for any other language you can support within the runtime on native. And when you do this, again, we're not going to do any fancy things, so we're basically just going to print this entire thing to command line and see what's going to happen. So let's take a look at now the flow, the configuration portion of the entire thing. Similarly to all the other way we've configured our applications, we're going to have a principal object that's defined by native, the flow object, that defines the name and all the other parameters. And it has two components. One is the trigger, as in what we want to connect to from the source of events. It includes the name of the project as well as the topic, as well as the connection. This is the target for where the events should be processed for. Nothing new in here. We're deploying a simple function which is going to be representing the route. So let's go and apply this. Flow. There we go. We should see some additional resources being created, I think. Oh, that's great. That's just great.
You broke it again.
There we go. What native is doing now is going through the operation of provisioning these resources. Now, again, let's fire the switch over here and generate some data. So we're going to go and generate generate MQTT data. This is going to be super simple. It's simple object that represents a source of the event the unique identifier for each one of those events, some timestamp, and a random number between 1 and 10. This is as sophisticated as it's going to get today, I'm afraid. And then let's switch over here. And what we will see that using that configuration, we were able to, let's do this. Let's take that IoT and decrease the noise level in here a little. Pod, container, user, container.
Nope.
Oh, it's helpful when you spell it correctly. Container. What we see is the output of those. I haven't written any specific code other than a function that handles events. All the plumbing of that into that code, into the route, was handled for me. You're still benefiting from all the other principal properties of native, which is the auto scaling, which is the up and down scaling and provisioning and all that.
Okay. Thank you. Can we switch back to slides, please? Great. So go to the next slide for a second. Great. OK. So just to make it more concrete, what we just saw, right, was we basically had the Go function on the bottom that Mark wrote. But again, we had deployed that bit previously, because one of the concepts that we wanted to demonstrate is the notion of late binding, right? So you want to go and define your function, you want to run the function, you want to go ahead and roll that forward independent of how it is wired to something else, right? So the function is happily running. Notice it was sleeping there, right? It was getting no traffic. And then it came up when we started getting that. And the pub sub event source and the topic were our event sources and event types in this particular instance. Those are user-defined also, so you can come in if you have some existing systems that you want to go and wire in. There's a way to come in there and extend the system by providing glue logic to say, OK, this is how you go ahead and configure things. And the topic subscription that Mark showed for the flow was precisely that. It says, there's the GCP pub sub. I want to go and get events from this topic, and I want them to wire it into this Go function. So that was pretty simple. Again, it was very, very nice way. What we didn't show you there is that the nice thing is there's a clear life cycle here. So once you come in and you delete that flow object, it's going to go away and clean up. So for example, pub sub resources are deleted. And again, it decouples the event production from the consumer, which is a very nice property. Okay. Now, underneath, again, there's a lot of complexity that we don't get a chance to show here, but there is additional resources that typically are facing the operator persona here, so things like channels and buses, so that the traffic is shuffling through there and so forth. But again, because we are focusing on what the developer sees, this is the developer experience right here. We are really piggybacking off of CNCF Cloud Event support. So a lot of our friends at Google and colleagues over at other companies have been working on standardizing the cloud events, trying to make sure that in the near future, there's standardization on what flows on the wire there and how do you consume events and things like that. So we are using that. And if you looked at the code, we had Go types, and that's because, well, that code was written a little while ago. By now, there is cloud event support there too, so yay. But anyways, so that's our eventing story. So we started this whole talk about saying, yay, you should come take a look at Knative because it helps you as the developer. So how did we do, Mark?
All right, so let's go back to this original list. Again, developers just want to write the code, don't want to do anything else. We've showed you certain demos that kind of illustrated the capabilities that native enables the developers to not have to worry about building Docker images. So frankly, you can be a developer on native and not have any Docker components installed locally, any image builds tools whatsoever. None of the pushing to registry either. Deploy services, we don't have to worry about it. We simply push the code. Exposing this to the routes we're creating for us automatically. The logging and monitoring was enabled, although looks like one of those monitoring capabilities was broken today. And we showed you also scaling. So scaling from 0 to 1, 1 to 0, and 1 to n in whatever order you want to go there. So lots of room to improve still, but many of the boring, the plumbing-related activities the developer has to do every day, hundreds of times, if they're really developing, is handled for you by Knative automatically. Native is also extendable. Now, any software that anybody has ever written implements opinions of the developer. Knative is not different. It implements opinions that we have based on years of learning from developing software at Google at the scale that Google operates. Implements opinions of the partners and contributors to the project. But from the very beginning, it was very important for us that these opinions are not held very tightly, that we can change those as the use cases come up. Serverless is still very beginning stages, frankly, at very, very beginning stages, and things will evolve. So we want to make sure that those opinions can be replaced when the use case you're working on is not being served by capabilities at native. So a lot of that is baked right into the API. That means event sources and types. I think if you go to our GitHub repository today, you will see examples for pops up, you will see GitHub, you will see a couple other ones, but it's not a large portfolio of events. We are going to get better there. It includes support for a number of different build packs. The Pivotal team has, for example, provided a build pack for C# that we have not developed. So you can extend those and configure this post-installation on native. Includes a lot of network configuration. So for example, for the demonstration today, we're using GCP Gateway. We're using SSL configuration for that was enabled to us by native, IP configuration for static IP, number of different variables there, logging and tagging. Now, Knative does not obfuscate Kubernetes. Underneath is still Kubernetes, and you have still access to it. In fact, I was using the very same tool you're using to manage Kubernetes itself. So if you feel like it, you could come in and change some of the implementations that we've done, including the auto-scaling strategy. I showed you auto-scaling based on number of requests. You could base this on latency to a connection to the database or something like that. I don't recommend doing it on the first day playing with native, but you could. Functions invokers, the community at large is working on the best way of implementing this for Go or Python or Node.js. Different message buses that you can implement. There's a lot of different customization options. All right, we have 3 minutes to go, and we do want to leave some time for questions. So there's a couple links in here. First of all, everything we've shown you today is reproducible. If you go to our documents repository in knative.org, you can get there, start from there, and it will navigate you to everywhere else. You could also, if you don't want to play the role of an operator, which for the purposes of demo, I was playing, we have a sign-on for early access to serverless add-on on GKE, which will do all of that for you with a single command. Give me knative, boom, done. Or give me a serverless stack, which is kind of using the components that were released later as open source for Knative. We also have a pretty vibrant community already, so if you looked at it and you go, you know what, this sounds interesting, I would love to contribute, or these guys don't know what they're doing, let me tell you, let me show you how it's really done. Come in here, the community inside of our repository is a good place to start, talks about the code of conduct, talks about the kind of how get you started, and even highlights set of best to start with issues that are already out there, and trust me, there's a bunch of this there. And as any hip project nowadays, we have a Slack channel that's open. Not sure that exact URL works right now, but if you go to the GitHub repo, if you follow the instructions there, it will go. The self-registration in Slack is not smooth. Ville and I would love to hear your feedback. We would love to hear your comments after a session or right now.
Yeah, please do us one favor and go to your handy-dandy mobile devices or however you fill out the form that says how we did. It's very important to us, because if we get no information, then we can improve. So please take the time. It should be very, very quick.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.